God and money. And then we'll have somebody follow him, and it is Mr. Bedford. He's a retired police chief of Corville, and he'll talk about fraud. Go ahead.
Can everyone hear this? I've never worn one of these things before. Jane, you cannot hear me. Okay. This is my first seniors conference, and I'm trying to picture what lunch is like at a seniors conference when, if you're like me, you're sitting there and you're going, man, I'm feeling tired. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this afternoon. I sure hope we have a good speaker after lunch. And his wife says to him, oh dear, don't worry, it's going to be wonderful. We have a retired accountant speaking afterwards. This is going to be great. We lucked out. The actuary couldn't make it. So, but I have to ask for your grace for three reasons. One, I'm not a professional speaker. I don't do this very well. Number two, I'm almost 72, so my mind doesn't work that fast anymore. And number three, and I probably should have told Martin this. I kind of feel bad about not telling him, but 1 o'clock is usually my nap time. So I'm gonna have maybe a little trouble with that. My assignment today is to talk about financial challenges for seniors. And when I was given this assignment, I thought, well, I could go two different directions. I can talk about the challenges in strictly money terms that Jeannie and I faced as I went into retirement. We could talk about how to sell capital assets and legally not pay any tax. We could talk about Roth rollovers in retirement, how that works. We could talk about when to take Social Security, or we could talk about qualified charitable distributions. Or the other avenue would be to talk about God's view of money and what that means in retirement. And so, trying to decide which direction to go, I went to my good friend, my senior pastor, Chris Arch, and I said, which direction should I go on this? And he said, do number two. Now that's a good consult when it's only 30 seconds, right? If you're with your pastor longer than that, it's not a good sign. So I'm doing number two, but first I'm going to talk a little bit. I just want to tell you, in your materials today, there's a 3-page outline on qualified charitable distributions. And it's important. If you're not using qualified charitable distributions, if you're 70 and a half or older, and you have a taxable IRA, it's extremely beneficial financially to use them. And there are a lot of benefits to it. And I'm not going to go over all right now because that's not where I'm going with this today. But if you do have questions about any of the things I just mentioned, about Roth conversions or required minimum distributions or qualified charitable distributions, I understand that security's been told to apprehend me and keep me in check out there until you've all gone, so I'm going to be here till the end. and just look me up afterwards, and I'm going to be around, okay? So, in our Sunday school class, we've been reading a book called Money, Possessions, and Eternity by Randy Alcorn. And in our class, I asked the question, how would you complete this sentence? From a biblical point of view, from a Christian point of view, the really good thing about money is what? And so we wrestled with that for a little while. And then one really bright person in our class said, the really good thing about money is it can be used as a tool to spread the gospel. And I thought, wow, that is really good. In fact, that's the best thing about money. And the really interesting thing about it was that wasn't what I was looking for. What I was looking for was the really good thing about money is it reflects my spiritual condition. And in the book, there's a guy named Richard Halverson. You can tell I'm a senior. I have to put these on and take these off. And he says, Jesus said more about money than any other single thing because when it comes to a man's real nature, money is of first importance. Money is an exact index to a man's spiritual condition. All through Scripture, there is an intimate correlation between the development of a man's character and how he handles his money. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about our spiritual condition, how we handle money, and what it's going to look like as we head into the last part of our life, okay? Now, I'm an accountant, and we love financial statements, and I know everyone here does too, okay? And we love, there's a thing called a balance sheet, which tells us how much we're worth at any point in time. Now, if I had all your personal financial statements, and I looked at them, I couldn't tell anything about you, about your spiritual condition, okay? That's because you can be very rich and be a drug dealer, or you can be very rich because you've been a businessman and you've worked hard to serve your fellow man. Or you can be poor because you've been on the mission field serving God and you're rich in God's things, but not rich in money when you retire. Or you can be poor because you've chased the wrong things in life, you've lived a sinful life, you've been lazy, a drunkard, and so on. So what you have now doesn't tell me anything on the balance sheet. Now, another statement we love, though, is the income statement, and we love that statement. And that tells you what happened over a period of time, from this point here to this point here, where your money came from, where it went, okay? And as Christians, we believe that the first principle of stewardship is it's all God's money. So when I look down on there, I don't just look at the donations, I have to look at everything. Have I been spending this the way that God wants me to? And so I asked our class, I said, what does that look like? Spending my money as if it's all God's. And one very bright person who's here today said, well, that's kind of hard to say because, you know, it doesn't always work out that way. Okay, well, there's a gap then between the way I'm spending God's money and the way I should be spending God's money. And I thought, how do I get a handle on that? What would be a good way to think about that? Okay, suppose I took my financial statement and I look at how much I give to the church, and I look at how much I'm spending on utilities, insurance, and everything else, and maybe looked at what I'm spending on myself, my hobbies and luxuries and things like that. Maybe that'd give me an idea of you know, how I'm doing with God's resources. But then I had another thought. I thought, what if, now think about this with me, what if God came to me today and he said, you know, Rafus, it's April 13th, and we're 3.5 months into the year, and here's what I'm going to do. On December 31st of this year, I'm going to put your personal financial statement, your profit and loss statement for you and Jeannie up on the wall for everybody to see. Okay. Now, if God said that to you, what would your reaction be? Oh, okay, that's fine. Or, no, not that. I don't want everyone to see that. Well, the right answer is, oh, okay. Because if I've been accountable to God, if I've been using his resources the way I'm supposed to be using it, I'm accountable to God. That's who I care about. If I'm not accountable to God and I think it's hidden and he's not watching, I'm going to have a different reaction. So I would assert for me, the difference in my behavior now going forward, knowing it's going to be up there compared to what it would have been otherwise, is a measure of either my spiritual immaturity or my spiritual disobedience. Now, about 20 years ago, Jeannie and I took a class from Focus on the Family, and it was called The Truth Project. And the speaker was a gentleman named Del Tackett. And Del told a story about a person he was counseling. And he was counseling a young man who had an addiction to pornography. And the young man said to him, you know, I'm fine when my wife and kids are here, but when they're gone and I'm home alone, I really struggle with this. And Del said to him, do you believe that God is omniscient and omnipresent? And the guy said, oh, of course I do. And Del said, no, you don't. If you believe that, why would you struggle and do these things in the presence of God and not in the presence of your wife and child? Well, if I'm doing something different with my finances, with God's money, when I think people here are watching, then when God is watching, I'm in the same situation as that man. Do I really believe that God is watching me, and am I really handling God's money the way I'm supposed to be? Now, let me go on here. During our Sunday school class, we've had a lot of fun talking about winning Lotto America. I see some people in our Sunday school class over there, and I have to correct that. Actually, I've been having a lot of fun talking about it. I think they keep going, why does this guy keep talking about winning Lotto America? Well, it's a lot of fun. And there are two questions that I have, okay, regarding Lotto America. Now, number one would be this. If I won Lotto America, and there are three parts to this, what would change in my life? Okay, for number one, what would change as far as the material items in my life? My house, my cars, my furniture, my tennis courts, my swimming pool, my stables, okay? Number one, how much of a change would that make? Number two, how would the services that I consume and have change? Okay, right now Jeannie and I are blessed. She does our cooking, and we do our own cleaning and laundry and so forth. I cut the grass and shovel the snow and do the gardening. How would that change? Who would we hire to do things for us that we're not doing now? And number three, what would happen to the use of my time? How would that change if I had unlimited amounts of money? So, let me go back to number one. For me, and for me alone, this may not be true for you, but it is true for me. To the extent the physical things, the stuff that I have in my life changes because I have an unlimited amount of money, it is a measure of my spiritual immaturity. And I say that because right now God has given me everything I need, more than everything I need amply. I live in a very modest middle-class house. Looks like every other house in the street. But if you have perspective, 99.9% of the people that have ever lived would love to live in my house. I could give you, there are two of us, live in a house, 3 bathrooms. When I grew up, I was 4 kids and 2 parents. We had 1 bathroom. I had 2 sisters. My memory of my childhood is standing outside the bathroom door. We are so blessed with what we have, with gardens and refrigerators and freezers and computers. If I yearn for more, in one sense I'm saying, God, I'm not really grateful. You haven't really done enough for me. And I'm also saying, God, I think I can be fulfilled by things, when in fact I've come to the conclusion I need to be very content with the things God has given me and very uncontent with my spiritual condition. That's where I should be working. That's where my focus should be. And I think in society, that's just the opposite of the culture. Okay? I should be discontented with the stuff I have and don't even recognize I have a spiritual condition or a spiritual health issue. Okay? So, the thing about money and possessions is that it both reflects my spiritual condition and it affects my spiritual condition. So if I have all this money, not only am I telling you what my values are, but it's going to turn my head. I'm not going to be looking at the Lord. I'm not going to be doing the things I should be doing. I'm going to be dealing with my money. I'm going to be dealing with my things. So it is going to affect what I'm doing. I wrote a few things in here. Well, let me talk a little bit about hiring people to do my work. And I want to back up and simply say this. Okay, I talked about my spiritual deficit, the things that I want, the bigger house and everything. I want to make clear, there are people, godly people, who have built bigger houses, nice, lovely houses, and they've turned them over to the Lord. They use it, they open it to the church, they open it to the people that need it. I'm not talking about that. There are people that build bigger houses because their family's grown. I'm not talking about that. There are people that need different houses because they have medical needs. I'm not talking about that. I think if everyone sitting here knows what the old man is like, what he craves, that's what I'm talking about. So if you're sitting here and you've built or you've done something, I'm talking about me. Okay? You can apply that to you however you want to apply it. The same thing about hiring people to do my work. There are people that you get older, you need to hire people to do your work. There are people that even when they could do the work, have better things they can be doing. If you're a doctor, you could spend your time better doing something than maybe your yard work. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about hiring people to do what I can do for myself, what I should be doing for myself, and turning my point of view from what it should be, that God put me here to serve others, to looking around and saying, how can I find people to serve me? Okay? So that's the danger in a situation with wealth. Now, the second question is related to winning the lottery. And you see the enthusiasm I have for winning the lottery. I really, this is really good. I asked a question, and I said, no one here is going to win the lottery. We know you're not going to win Lotto America, and I'm not either, and unless God decides we are, but he hasn't told me that he will. But supposing you were sitting at a table and God put a little button in front of you and he said, okay, all you have to do to win the Lotto America, $800 million, is hit the button. Would you hit the button? Now, the question is, no, there's no right or wrong answer. There can be an honorable reason to hit the button. There can be a dishonorable reason to hit the button. There can be an honorable reason not to hit the button. And there can be a reason it's not so good not to hit the button. But the question is, would you or would I stop and contemplate that? I know that there are people in the room here, godly people, smart people, who would say, I could hit the button, I could resist the temptation of all the things and all the stuff and it wouldn't turn my head, and I could use it to spread the gospel. And then there are people like me that say, I don't know about that. There's danger there. There's huge spiritual danger there. I don't know about that. And yet you could look and say, but Rafus, you're a spiritual coward. You could do a lot of good things with this. And the only point I would make to you is when you're dealing with wealth, deal with it carefully. There's a right, there may not be a right or a wrong, but it is fraught with danger. So let me just go back to the issues with money, with winning it and the houses and everything else. Part of the danger, the big danger of that, is where my trust goes, where my heart goes. When I have 400 million or 800 million, suddenly my security is in my money, my faith is in my money, and it turns my head from God. And I was talking to someone earlier today. It is, even in the evangelical church, we really underestimate the danger of wealth. We can talk about poverty and the bad effects that it has, but wealth is incredibly dangerous. And in our book, there's a gentleman named Thomas Carlyle, and I want to read a quote from him. He said, "Adversity is sometimes hard upon a man, but for one man who can stand prosperity, there are 100 who will stand adversity." Okay? Got that? We can stand adversity. We can stand hardship. But prosperity, we don't stand so well. It sneaks up on us. It grabs our heart. It grabs our attention. Interestingly, John Steinbeck, totally apart from Carlyle, said almost exactly the same thing. He said, "A strange species we are. We can stand anything God and nature can throw at us, save only plenty. If I wanted to destroy a nation, I would give it too much, and I'd have it on its knees, miserable, greedy, sick." Anybody think that's right? Anybody think a country that maybe would reflect that? You know, I have a friend who's in the military. He's really interested in recruiting. And I'm a veteran, so I'm kind of interested in that too. And I did some research, and I found out that if you were 16 to 24 years old in 1940, if you look at that population, 80% of those young men served in the armed forces in World War II. Of the other 20%, many of them were involved in essential defense industries and were active there. So probably 90% or more were fit for service. Today, the Pentagon says, 84 years later, that 2/3 of military-age people are not fit for service. They're either physically, mentally, or morally unfit to serve. 84 years of prosperity, and that's what that's done. I want to go down now to, let me see here. I want to talk about a little section of our Sunday school book. And the author talks briefly about a friend of his, a lady named Leona Bryant. And I'm going to read you what he says. He says, when she learned that she only had a short time to live, there was a radical change in her perspective. She said, quote, "The most striking thing that's happened is that I find myself totally uninterested in all the conversations about material things. Things used to matter to me, but now I find my thoughts are never on possessions, but always on Christ and people. I consider it a privilege that I can live each day knowing that I will die soon. What a difference it makes." Okay? Does that resonate? Let me ask you this. Let me ask me this. When I have a short time to live, am I going to turn my eyes from things and turn them to Christ and people? I hope so, but here's the point. I only have a short time to live. Why don't I do it now? Why don't I turn from all my stuff that's consuming my thoughts and my day and cleaning my stuff and moving my stuff and shopping for my stuff and talking about my stuff and using my stuff and turn them to Christ and people? Why don't I do that? You know, I love perspective, having good perspective. And we talk about how short our time is here. I look around this room and almost everyone here is more biblically literate than I am. But you know, in James, he says, why do you not even know what will happen tomorrow? What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a while and then vanishes. Okay? Now, if I live to be 90, I've lived 80% of my life. If I only live to be 80, I've lived 90% of my life. That's 10% of a mist left. There's not much there. And I got to tell you, being a CPA, I was tempted to do a calculation. And what I did was I took, both my grandfathers and my dad died in their 80s. So I took their dates of birth and date of death for each one of them, stuck it in Excel, had it calculate the number of days each one of them had lived, took the average, and put it on my birth date to find out the date I would die if I lived the same amount as the average of my grandparents. So, on April 1st, 2039, you can expect me to depart this earth if I live as long as the average of my grandparents. And Richard, I was meaning to talk to you about maybe reserving the church for the 6th or 7th for one of the small rooms downstairs should accommodate it. No. And yet people, we seem to be in denial about our mortality. You know, one of the things, and people have heard me talk about this in my practice, it's very common for people to say things like, well, if I die, what will happen to the personal property that's not provided for in the will? And you know, in our society, we've come to the point that almost sounds normal. But think about it. I'd always back them up and say, no, it's not if I die. It's when I die what'll happen to it. Because we think, well, okay, it's going to happen to him and him and him, but it's not going to happen to me. And every day's the same. And the reality, and Pastor Habiger said this, every day is one less day. There's a circle, big circle around a date out there. We're getting closer to it all the time. And we are in denial. In fact, I understand that. You know, every time I've gone to a visitation at a funeral home, it's been for someone else. It hasn't been for me. and so I just assume it's always going to be for somebody else. But someday the big car is going to pull up, and they're going to put me in it, and off I'm going to go to the cemetery down at Rock Island Arsenal. And that's just the reality. And we should learn to view ourselves and our lives in that perspective. I have a few years ago. When I say 15 years from now, based on average, okay, we'll go one standard deviation out, 1820. But that doesn't mean anything. It might be the next moment up until there. That's just the back end of it. But it could be any time now. And we need to think in terms, have that perspective. Don't live as if you'll need your money forever. And I misspoke, as if we will need God's money here forever. We won't. You know, there are a lot of differences between a Darwinist and a Christian. But one of the big ones is this. And I've spoken with Darwinists about this, and they're very happy about it. If you're a Darwinist and you believe that we're here as a result of a cosmological accident, nothing you do in life really matters. Anything you do, eventually time will just erase. Okay? So it doesn't matter if you live your life as Mother Teresa caring for the poor, or as Ted Bundy, a mass murderer. In 100,000 years, it's not going to matter. Okay? If you're a Darwinist. If you're a Christian, it matters. The things we do have eternal effects. We have the short number of years left to do things that will have an eternal effect on the lives of others and the lives of ourselves. And the way we spend our money can have that effect if we invest it to spread the gospel. And that's what I said earlier. I was looking for one thing, but a really wise person said, the good thing about money is it can be used to spread the gospel. Okay? You know, I have a friend that's here right now. He was saying in our Sunday school class something really wise. He said, we're all going to be held to account someday by God, but maybe God will have grace on us and say, you know what? I'm going to show you the effects of what you did in life. I'm going to show you the effect of the money that you gave to these ministries. I'm going to show you those shoeboxes that you sent out, who got them, and what that did with them, and how that affected them, and how the people that they met were affected by that. And that would be a really glorious and wonderful thing. And I'm going to show you how you were affected and blessed because of that. But you know what? There's another side of that that's not so glorious. Because when I get there and God says to me, okay, Rafus, here's that pile of money you had left there in your IRA. Here are the things you could have done that had an eternal effect. Here's the people that could have been blessed for eternity. Here's the way you could have been blessed in your life and for eternity. And I think that is a perspective that I need to keep in mind. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the perspective of giving, too. Because I think that I need some work on that. I need to work on my perspective on giving. And the best analogy I have of that is early 2000s, I started riding a bicycle. I hadn't ridden for a long time. And I get on a bicycle and I go 4 or 5 miles and I think that was a long bike ride. And so then I kept at it and then I'd go 10 or 12 miles and it kept getting to be more and more. And my perspective changed. And then one day my brother retired and he said, hey, I'm going to do Ragbri. You want to do some days with me? And I said, yeah, sure. And I looked down, 80 miles. So I started training and doing 50 and 60 miles, and my perspective changed. Well, maybe it's time for my perspective to change about giving to the Lord. Maybe I shouldn't just, I tell people, don't tithe like an accountant. Don't look at your income, multiply it by 10%, and then make sure you're a little bit over that. Now, I tell them, if you're not tithing at all, then tithe like an accountant. But that's at this point, I need to change my perspective. I need to think about that when God says to me, look at this, what you could have done with this. And so maybe instead of doing 5 or 10 miles and being a 5 or 10 mile giver, maybe I should use my qualified charitable distributions to be a 20, a 40, or 50 mile giver. So instead of maybe saying, wow, I did a good job, I gave 10 shoe boxes this year, $200, I really let them have it. Maybe 100, well, that'd be 2,000. And I know some people here, maybe that would be huge for some people. But there are some people here that could maybe do 1,000 at $20,000 and not affect our lifestyle one bit. And if I did that, it does me no honor in the sight of God to give him my surplus. I'm not hurting myself, and I won't even do that. So I need to change my perspective about giving, about what it is a right size to be giving. Now I know I'm going over my time, but Pastor Habakkuk said just go ahead and go for it. So you're stuck here. Well, I want to say briefly what to do when you have a husband and wife that aren't exactly on the same page with giving. And I've seen this in my practice, and right away you think, okay, wife is real giving, her heart is open, husband, crabby old crotchety guy. I mean, let's just say theoretically in my family that, say, Jeannie is a loving, giving person, and theoretically I'm a crabby, crotchety old accountant. No, I mean, that's just theoretical. But let me just say to the crabby, crotchety one, and it can be the other way around, I've seen that too. You know, our pastor tells us that your theology affects your behavior, and your behavior affects your theology. Well, you know what? If you have an open and warm heart, it affects your giving. But if you don't, give, and you might end up with an open and warm heart. And you might be surprised at what it does to bless your life, what it does to have your spouse change your opinion of you. And so if you're the crotchety guy, get with it, okay? Then I also want to say this, be wise in your giving. Start with your church, end with your church, and if you have amply blessed God's money back into the church, Jeannie and I believe in giving to organizations that spread the gospel by meeting human needs. Those are the organizations we like to give to. If you give to other organizations that aren't a church, let me just say, I put the name of the organization in Google, and then I put Form 990. And it'll come up, that's a return for an organization exempt from income tax. And I go down a couple of pages, and I look for officers and directors to see how they're compensated. And if I see that there's an organization, and I have seen this, where the leaders are getting millions of dollars, I don't support them. They're not working for the Lord, okay? And that's all I'll say, but I just wanted to give you that advice, okay? Now, finally, I wanted to say just a couple last comments. I had a friend, and I think most of you know who it was, that put his heart and soul into starting Heritage Christian School. He's with the Lord now, and he put tons of time, tons of his money, and he just loved what he was doing. He was so excited about it. And at one point he came to me and he said, you know, Bob, all my friends in the business community are coming up to me and saying, hey, buddy, what's your angle on this? How are you making money from doing this? Come on. And he looked at me and he said, you know, they think I'm greedy, but they don't know how greedy I really am. I don't want money. I want God's blessing. And you know what? I think that's right. We should be greedy for God's blessing. We should be aggressive in going after it. And he was blessed. And let me just say one other thing, going back to the winning the lottery and craving things. When I love the Lord and I am grateful for the house I have, I will enjoy that little middle-class house more than the guy with the $10 million mansion who needs more and more. We can enjoy the things God's given us because they're blessings from God. And that means more to us. So the irony is that we can enjoy those things more than the people that crave them. And it reminds me of what C.S. Lewis said when he said, aim for heaven and you get heaven and earth. Aim for earth and you get neither. And I think that that's right. And then I have two other quotes that I love. One is from Tozer. And Tozer said, sometimes I go to God and say, God, if thou dost never answer another prayer while I live on this earth, I will still worship thee as long as I live in the ages to come. For what thou hast already done. God's already put me so far in debt that if I were to live 1 million millenniums, I couldn't repay him for what he's done. You know, if I'm looking for rewards or something for being such a wonderful disciple, I'm thinking wrong. I'm so in debt for what God has done, for what Christ has done. To take someone and give me far more than I ever deserved, to ever expect anything, is kind of like if my neighbor forgave me a $10 million debt and then asked me to cut his grass, and I said, well, what are you going to give me? When you're that far in debt, you say, what do you want? What do you want, Lord? And then finally, I have one here, and this applies to a lot of different things, but it's one that I really love, and I think about it a lot. And this is from John Newton. And he said, if two angels would receive at the same moment a commission from God, one to go down and rule Earth's grandest empire, and the other to go and sweep the streets of his meanest village, it would be a matter of entire indifference to each which service fell to his lot, the post of ruler or the post of scavenger. For the joy of the angels lies in its obedience to God's and God's will. And with equal joy, they would lift a Lazarus in his rags to Abraham's bosom, or be a chariot of fire to carry an Elijah home. The joy of giving, and we should give in joy, is the joy of doing it for our Lord. And you know, as we get ready to spend our last few days here, I think there's nothing better that we can do than find that joy. Thank you for your attention.
You will not get out of here late today. And that's because you have this in your folder. You don't have to look at it now, but you have it. It's a bright blue one, and it talks about everything I was going to talk about, because I thought that we have limited time. I want to assure people if you have questions about looking at this or anything I do say, please feel free to talk to me. I'm going to be around here until probably everybody's left also. So we're going to talk about, briefly, very briefly, frauds, scams, and identity thefts. Now, everybody in here has been subjected to frauds, scams, right? You've gotten the note, the email that says, you won the lottery, or you won this or that. Click this link. Don't ever click a link. Not at least not unless you know exactly where it's coming by. What about McAfee or Amazon that sends you an email, and it's got the logo right there, and it's got their address right there. And it says, we processed your purchase for $479, and it'll be shipped out in the next 2 days. And you're saying, I didn't make a purchase. And then on the bottom it says, if you have any questions, call this number or click this link. Don't call the number and don't click the link. Go to Amazon if you have an account, log on, and see if in fact that charge is made. Go to Amazon, log on, and find out if it happened. Take your cursor on that email, put it up over the top of the person it came from, like Amazon. See what because it will reveal the actual email and IPO of the sender. And if it says amazon.com.georgefranklinjones.gmail.com, it's not from Amazon. There's lots of things you can do. And I talk about some of those things here. I talk about the grandpa scam. It's been around for years. And we won't go back to the Nigerian letters and all those things. I did investigations on this for, well, even as chief. I was in 44 years of law enforcement, and I had to deal with this all the time. Grandpa, grandma too. You're awake, you're asleep at night, and I go to sleep a lot earlier now than I used to. And when I sleep hard. The phone rings, and you go, oh. He goes, Grandpa, I'm in trouble. Is that you, Johnny? Yes, Johnny. And I'm down here in Mexico, and we were on a vacation, and we all got arrested, and I need $5,000. Johnny, what happened? Well, that's my friends and blah, 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 blah. Well, you've already told him his name should be Johnny. It's not your grandson. You're confused, you're disoriented, and you say, what can I do? He says, can you go to Wells Fargo, or Western Union, I mean. Can you go to Western Union and send me that money, and here's the number in Mexico that you can send it to. Okay, you go down there, you send the money, and Johnny's, or the guy that pretends to be Johnny, could be a block away from you, and go to that same Western Union after you do, and put his code in, and he's got your money. He's not in Mexico. And it happens a lot. Out in Corporal, we had dozens of these. Iowa City had dozens of these, and this is 10 years ago, and it's still going on. This is prolific. Look around. We got a bunch of people in here. 1/3 of you, 1 out of 3 people, will be the victim of either, well, actually, it's probably scams. Definitely scams. 1/3 of you will be, or more, will be deal with scams where they try and take your money. I mean, everybody will do that, but you'll actually give them money or whatever. And nationally, this is true also for identity theft. So I'm going to switch over to identity theft, but I do have a couple things on here. And it does talk about, under scams, you've got electronic scams, you've got psychological scams. One of the psychological scams is make you fearful, make you afraid, make you worry that my grandson's there. Well, you know one thing? If it happened in the daytime, you call up Johnny's mom and say, what happened with Johnny? Is he down there? And they say, no, he's in the backyard. So, things we would normally do, but they get you at the wrong time. There's urgency, there's fear, and they get you to do what you shouldn't be probably doing. Phishing, and it's not the type that Al Jones likes to do. It's a PHISH, and it's where they're throwing basically a big hook out there, and they send you the email, and they're asking for information. If you call that number, or if you click that link, it's a phishing scam, and you're going to get trouble. If you call the number, they're going to give you a big deal, and they're going to ask you, well, we need to verify it's you, so what's the last 4 numbers of your social security number? What's your date of birth? I don't have this information here. Why don't you let me call back? And now they've got some of that personal information they need for identity theft. And definitely 1 out of 3 people at any age group will be a victim of identity theft, at least once. And I'm one of them. I found out here briefly, and by the way, I've got some safety guidelines on the bottom here, and make sure you look at those on the scams. Let me switch to identity theft because I'm done. But anyway, identity theft. It's devastating. It can cost you lots and lots of money. So what you want to do is somebody will get in there, and I had someone totally out of the blue. I got a call from IPERS. Now, some of you who still work for the state know what IPERS is. Someone had written submitted a form to transfer my monthly IPERS payment, my retirement payment, to a different bank in Texas. You know those Texans, you can't. Oh, sorry, Hal. Anyway, so what happened was I didn't know anything about it. And she called me, she says, there's just something about this that bothers me. Can you verify this is legit? And I said, what are you talking about? I do everything I'm supposed to do right to protect myself, and somebody got in there. And so we were less than 30 minutes when she called me from the time they were making that big dump for the deposits. And so we stopped it. And it can happen to anybody. I'm really going to skip through here quickly, but I got a letter here dated January 23rd. So I got it after that. And it says, and I won't tell you which company it was, on or around November 16th, 2023, blah, 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 we had a breach in our security, and you were one of the people whose information was compromised. Here's some of the things that were probably compromised from your files here. Contact information, date of birth, diagnosis, information, treatment cost information, lab results, service date, provider name, prescription information, health insurance and or claim information, social security number, driver's license number, and financial account information. If somebody has even 2 of those things, they can take everything you have. And I'm not exaggerating here. They can get in there, they can get this stuff, they can go to your financial institution, they can have all the information to do it, they can sign on as you because everybody knows what your passwords are. Be quite honest, that's very, very simple to get. And, well, most of the time anyway. So guard yourself. And I put some more information, the whole back page is about identity theft and what it is and some of the stuff, but there's steps to take if you believe you're a victim of identity theft. I put down all the different things I did and I had to do when I was dealing about it because my identity theft came in December 14th, a month and a half or so after this breach, and a month and a half before I found out about the breach. Now, was it the same breach? I don't know, but it's kind of coincidental. And then I have a deal on the bottom here. It says recommendation, and I'm going to hit this in general, but I want you to read this. Obtain and install strong, and I have it highlighted, strong, identity theft prevention software on all of your devices that have access to the internet to monitor all your areas of vulnerability, and then consider software that provides all or most of the following components. And I have a whole bunch of things listed there. There's software out there, and I have it. I'm not going to say which one. I'm not going to say here which one I have. There's good software out there that will do all the things I have mentioned here. All the things that they will monitor, all the things they'll do. They even have a provision to reimburse you losses up to $1 million and more if you were on their program and you were a victim of identity theft. 1 in 3 of you, if not more, will be a victim of identity theft. And I got this software, and all I will say is that the amount of money that was going to be transferred to me that 1 month is 45 times less expensive than, well, no, the amount of money is 45 times more expensive than the cost of the software. In other words, take whatever amount, the software is only a couple $100, and it's for a year. So seriously consider that. Go to whatever you want to go to authorities and say, which is the best software for identity theft? You've heard names out there. There's names you don't hear, but there's good ones. And all these things I mentioned here as to what some of the components you want, they're available on a single one. And you're going to be told you need this protection over here by this company and this protection over here by somebody else. And the good ones have all those. So time's up. I'm actually over. You are late. But I will answer any questions you want outside here and today before you leave. But I want to make sure this is really, really important. And I found out that I came that close to having a catastrophic situation because I didn't have any of this. Well, I didn't have this software in place. So if you have questions, let me know, and we will get you. And actually, there's lots of things in here. If you look this over, you'll say, what is a virtual credit card? And I'll bet you most of you here don't know. Ask me, and I'll tell you. Anyway, thank you.